Hey guys, welcome to Peripheral Vision, and today we're taking a look at Sega Genesis, the controller. Or rather, the Sega Genesis controller, which came bundled with the Model 1 Sega Genesis. And this is pretty interesting, especially to me, because honestly I'm a lot more used to the Super Nintendo controller, and the design philosophies between the two are vastly different. But I will not overly compare, I'll restrain my Nintendo fanboy, and I'll just look at the controller for what it is. Starting over on the right side. We've got three, what they call triggers, or buttons, here, and that's A, B, and C. They have them labeled over top. Unfortunately, the C is worn out, but if you are that confused, you can look closer, and they have A, B, and C etched into the buttons, which I like. There's also a little mark here below the B. I don't know what that's about, but they're also indented into the controller. There's a nice little indentation there so that they're not sticking out too far, so nice little touch. I love nice touches. It's one of the things you'll notice about my reviews. If it's a little flourish or embellishment, I freaking love it. But what's cool is how they use these three buttons. I've been playing a lot of Sega Genesis games lately, especially for this whole Sega theme month, and they very rarely use all three buttons. In fact, some games just use all three buttons have the same action, and if they do use multiple inputs, it's usually action jump or jump action or something along those lines, and then the C button wouldn't even do anything. So I have noticed that Sega Genesis games seem to be a lot more simplistic in their relationship between the controller and the game, and not in a bad way. They're very effective in how they use the three buttons, but it's a lot less cluttered than, for example, I don't know, an N64 controller. So that's a nice touch. I like that. Unfortunately, with those three buttons, fighting games become a problem because a lot of fighting games, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Killer Instinct, whatever, require a 6-button layout, and for the Genesis they had to use the start button to toggle between the punches and kicks, which is not a very effective way of playing fighting games. So later on they did release a Genesis controller that had 6 buttons, but this is not that one, so I cannot count that. So this does have a little issue with that. On the left side of the controller, we've got the D-pad, and the D-pad is covered in circles. There's the big outer circle here with the little arrows, then there's the inner circle, which has the directions within it, including the little arrows showing off the diagonals, and there's a tiny circle in the middle, like a little dimple. And something that I should say is that the edges of this D-pad are actually pretty rigid. Something that is important to know is that over an extended playtime, these edges can actually wear out your thumbs a little bit. Not that they're not going to be bleeding or anything like that, but you'll notice it, or at least I notice it. Maybe it's something that after a while you just get calluses and you don't care, but as someone that is not used to these sort of hard edges, I did notice that it was a bit of a problem. Also, an interesting fact is that the connector for the Sega Genesis controller is the same as an Atari controller. So theoretically, you could plug this thing into an Atari 2600 and go all Pitfall, really bad version of Pac-Man on their butts, but there's that. And then we finally got to talk about, this thing's a big one. This is a very large controller. It's shaped in a boomerang-ish kind of way, kind of like a Batman symbol almost. You've got the nice, cool Sega Genesis logo right here. And I noticed that it's actually very similarly shaped to the Super Nintendo's Super Con 2B from QuickShot. It's very, very similarly shaped. It's almost like they took the Sega Genesis controller and were like, let's make a Super Nintendo controller out of that, and then they made the QuickShot. So that's just a weird thing to note. But that's pretty much it. Overall, in my experience with the Sega Genesis controller, I had a good time. It's a very effective controller, there's certainly no major issues, and I liked it. And as far as playing Sega games, well, it's your option. You can use this or maybe a third-party one. I don't know that much about the third-party stuff for Sega Genesis, but I'm going to be learning soon, so look forward to some of that. But Sega Genesis controller, a really nice little controller. Later days.